Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about Australia because Australia just took a giant step backwards for privacy for their citizens, and this is a textbook case of essentially what not to do if you're a democracy. Now, there are multiple sources on this one. You can go read about this, but here's what's going on. The Australian Senate just passed a controversial law giving new and powerful surveillance powers to their law enforcement agencies, including 60 different amendments proposed by the House of Representatives. Now, after the Surveillance Legislation Amendment, Identity and Disrupt Bill, that's what it's called, of 2020 is signed into law, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, or ACIC, and Australian Federal Police, AFP, will have 3 new controversial powers to handle online crime. Now, here's what's going on. The 2 law enforcement agencies will have quote-unquote data disruption power, whose purpose is to prevent, quote, the continuation of criminal activity by participants and be the safest and most expedient option where those participants are in unknown locations or acting under anonymous or false identities. Now, critics, including a senator from Victoria, Lydia Thorpe, basically mentioned that such power could be used to target a huge range of people. They didn't narrow it in scope. They're essentially giving their law enforcement the ability to look at almost everybody, from political activists to young people downloading content on the internet. Senator Thorpe said, and I quote, "No one is safe under these laws. It will affect grassroots communities across the country. It will affect children. It will affect anybody who downloads a movie illegally over the internet. They could go to jail for 5 years." Now, the second power that this law gives these agencies is called the Network Activity Warrant, which allows them to monitor internet activity of a suspect's network or device. This law also gives the AFP and ACIC the authority to control an online account to collect more information for an investigation. That's right. You have a Facebook account, you're a suspect, they can go in and take a look, and there you go. That is essentially the law. Now, some of the recommendations by the House of Representatives did make some changes that shield journalism, but many activists and critics still feel the bill's language does not protect vulnerable internet users. Again, this has passed the Senate, but I still believe from what I'm reading that the House of Representatives in Australia has yet to bring this into law, but it's looking like it will be, again, from everything that I've read. And to quote Senator Thorpe once again, the scope of the new powers is disproportionate compared to the threats of serious and organized cyber crime to which they are directed. There is a lack of evidence justifying the need for warrants of this nature beyond those already available. No other country in the Five Eyes Alliance has conferred powers on its law enforcement agency that this bill will. And that's true, not even here in the United States. Do our police, our law enforcement, local and federal, have this kind of power essentially given to them by the government. They have to get warrants. They have to go through the legal system in order to procure evidence to show that you or I are doing something illegal, and therefore they can do something. This is a sweeping bill, and really it honestly is a step backwards for Australian citizens and their privacy. If you're in Australia, I would absolutely be writing your House of Representatives representative or your senator about this. This is a huge problem that Australia has, and unfortunately, we are seeing a battle right now between the actual privacy that national constitutions in the Western world have afforded their citizens versus the government that wants more and more control in an ever-growing digital age. We are doing everything online, and by virtue of that, they see this as a great tool for surveillance. We have seen continuous attacks on things like hardened encryption, basically saying, well, what about the criminals? What about, protecting the children and all of that? And nobody wants criminals to thrive or children to be harmed. But at the same token, if we continue to build lowest common denominator laws, around the world, especially in democracies, westernized democracies, that's a huge problem to essentially the inalienable rights that countries like Australia, the United States, Canada, most of Europe give their citizens. It's a huge, huge issue, and I'm afraid that if Australia starts leading the way and starts basically creating what could ostensibly called a Western surveillance state, that other nations that follow along with common law, including the United States, will start picking those up and say, see, the Aussies can do it, and so can we. And that's a huge problem. And we've talked about authoritarian regimes. Literally today, as I'm sitting here talking to you, an article that I wrote on Afghanistan and now the Taliban, this authoritarian regime that now controls the internet, now controls these leftover biometric devices that are going to get their citizens at risk. What was an open and free society that saw young Afghan citizens thriving online on TikTok and social media and Instagram and all of this is now being clamped down, and that data is being used against them by their government. And while I am not in any way comparing the Australian government, even with this, to the Taliban, anything that moves us towards a more authoritarian, more surveillance level state is not a good thing. We've seen this around the globe and the impact that this has on on citizens of particular countries, and it's a huge, huge problem. So, and if you're an Australian, make sure that you are basically having your voice heard on this. You don't want this as a law. Trust me, we have a lot of issues with privacy laws here in the United States, but we don't have that. And I am glad that our Congress, our senators, our House of Representatives are not passing bills like that, and I hope they never do. So Australia, fight the power. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private, especially you Aussies. Take care.